All right, welcome back, everybody. This is stream number 21, and we're going to pick up where we left off yesterday. Again, I'm your host, Johnny Rush, and we ran into a few snags yesterday with attachments, trying to attach a prop, basically the pistol gun, to our player's hand. And the main reason was the props that I was trying to bring in were not set up and included as an asset as part of the Morph 3D character system that I downloaded for free. It just came with one prop, which was basically one attachable prop for the hand, which was a pistol, and that was it. And we have a lot of potentially could have a lot of items that we want to be able to pick up and put in our player's hand. And since there were not any included, I was trying to figure out a way to take the items that we have in our master inventory that would potentially be held in the hand of our player, such as our baseball bat and our pistol. Those are the two that we have right now. And so, I left yesterday's stream with having a difficult time trying to get the item to rotate properly, and I was able to actually attach it, I believe, to the wrist, but it was facing the wrong way, and no matter what I did with the rotations, it kept messing it up. And so, what I found out actually is the part of the code where I was actually sorry about that. I was zooming in and out over here on this just to get a better view. Anyways, the part of the code where I was zooming in and out of, or not zooming in and out, I'm sorry, the part of the code where I was adjusting the rotation and trying to adjust the position of our player prop just didn't work well. And so I have I dragged out our player here into the scene, this item right here, this VTPC MCS male character. And let me show you what I wound up doing, which actually worked. And I was looking for must be in the player manager. Yeah, I think that's where the code was that we were. Yeah, down here in the player manager. So let's go ahead and bring that up. Player manager. Yeah, and so where I was trying to modify the code was in this where the attached right hand prop was being called, and that was in here in this area. I was trying to readjust the positioning, and this is actually inside the update function, which is called every frame. And apparently what was happening, once you get to the update function, the reference point that I thought I started with, which is where he's in the, if you look at models using the T position, at that point, when it's executing the update function, he's long gone out of the T position at runtime and into his normal, generally the idle stance or whatever is set up for that model. And in this case, it was an idle stance. And so essentially, what happens? All the reference point was no longer valid. And so I was trying to make all my rotations based off of that. And you actually can't. The only way you can do it, the only place you can do it, is up in the start, which is the initialization for the player manager, and it can be done in there only. And so, especially with our props. So what I wound up doing, kind of cheated a little bit because my props were actually generic game objects that were in Unity, and they were not part of the morph system, the MCSML, like a CI prop official object that they provided, which had additional information that could work internally with their system. I had to play around with that. I showed you yesterday the scripts I had to add to get it to work, but what I wound up doing was creating, if we look here at this MCSML object here, and we go down to the third-person camera. Oh, that's the spawn, I'm sorry. Okay, these right here. I created a couple of game objects, generic game objects, and all it is a transform location. And I set up, and it's a child of the main character model. And I called one right hand AP for attachment position and pistol for the pistol. I could have called it primary, really. That's what it was. But I wanted to name it specific in case I later find out that when we get a different weapon, we're going to have to reposition it differently. We probably will, because this is for a single-handed weapon. Same with the bat. And so I created another game object called right hand AP baseball bat. And then inside of those, I dragged our pistol and our bat inside of those. Now they're deactivated right now, but what it allowed me to do, let's activate our player here so we can see him now. He's just thrown out in the world. There he is. And as you can see, our baseball bat is shown up there. Pistol is not. Oh yeah, it is. I'm sorry. It's just behind this camera. Can't really see it. So let's go ahead and turn that on. And you can see, if I highlight the location here, because we now basically just have a game object that's just lined up with his hand, I was able to take basically this right hand game object, right hand AP pistol game object, and use the gizmo here to just kind of locate it where I needed to. It was real simple. I just lined it up, rotated it just like any other 3D object that we've done in the past, and lined it up exactly where it needed to be, and it was perfectly fine. And then so I had that game object there, and then I basically unchecked this, which made it inactive. But all the transform information is saved, which has position and rotation. That's essentially what we need. Did the same with the bat. If we check that, oops, we check that. Actually, the right hand needs to stay checked. It's the pistol object underneath it. In order to, you'll see, in order to utilize these game objects I'm setting up so I can extract the transform and rotate and position and rotation information from the transform, they have to be enabled in our project. And it's easier to have it already enabled. I just hide the pistol. This is essentially there as a prop to help me see where it's at and align up the game object, the parent game object for that pistol, so I get a proper positioning. And so I did that for the bat as well. You see about where I lined up the bat. And this other pistol and bat here are used when we go to aim and shoot. You'll see that later. It's a first-person view of the bat and the gun. And so So we have these two game objects, right hand AP pistol and right hand AP baseball bat. Okay, so we can hide the bat now. So I just wanted to show those two right there. And of course we have our available props, which we've added before yesterday, into the Morph 3D system, our pistol and baseball bat. Now let's go to our code. And so a lot of this is still the same. We have our the M3D character manager is still there. Now I added the attachment points, right hand and right hand 2, because the pistol and the bat actually are positioned in a different location. So I had to use a secondary attachment point in the morph system. Now the right hand pistol and right hand baseball bat were created as attachment points, but these are going to be set to our game objects that we created, which have the exact position of where the prop needs to be. And so let's go down here into the start. And also I tagged those game objects I set up for the positioning as primary weapon spawn and secondary weapon spawn as well. So those are, well actually that's for the, I take that back, that's for the first person view. We've got a crosshair, primary weapon and secondary weapon, and so there's spawns that were set up for that. But down here is where we do the inside this else statement. Yesterday we just had a single attachment. These are the attachment points that are in the Morph 3D system that you add. So we go back to the character and look at attachment points. You'll see there's right hand attachment point R. That's the one they had, and I added the second one based off the same bone, the right hand, and it defaulted a name of right hand attachment point without the R after it. So you can't change those names apparently. So so that's where we set up the R hand and R hand 2 CI point objects. So those are the Morph 3D attachment points on the character. Now the R hand pistol and R hand baseball bat are the CI points, same object type, but we're creating them from a attachment point from a game object in our world, which are the R hand AP pistol, R hand AP baseball bat game objects that I set up that gave us the exact position, rotation, and everything of our prop. And those are the ones where I had turned off the props so they're not visible, but the game objects are left enabled and active in the world, so we have access to them. So this is how we get the game object. Now this is a cheat I did, so I didn't have to fool with playing around with manually adjusting numbers in code as far as rotation, position, and then I would try to change the X rotation, the Y, and Z. It never really seemed to do right. Because apparently it works best if you can apply it all at one time. And so this is what I do here. If you see the right hand, which is here, which is the attachment point in the morph system, I just assign its position and its rotation to the transformed position and rotation of our right hand pistol. And then R hand 2, which is for the baseball bat, which these are the ones that are in the morph system, the secondary attachment point. I just directly assign the R hand baseball bat position rotation off our game object. So doing that, we can directly set in one line of code or two, one for the position, one for the rotation, the exact position and location of the attachment point. And this apparently can only be done, and this is what I've, through trial and error, it has to be done in the start immediately before anything else is done to that position, such as adding a prop or doing anything like that. It has to be set before. So that worked out perfect. And it actually was easier because if I need to tweak that position or rotation, I just go back to Unity here down to the right hand AP pistol or the baseball bat, click this item, re-enable it, and then just do, click on this and then use the rotation and, position movement to adjust or alter whatever I need, which updates the transform. And then when I'm done, let's go back here, uncheck it. Of course, apply the changes to the character model so it goes back to our prefab. That's important. It has to go back to the prefab that's down here. We have the way you do that is anytime you alter an instance that's been pulled into the project there, the hierarchy, you apply those changes, which apply it back to the prefab. The prefab is the one we're actually spawning into the world, so it's important to do that. If this one here was the one we were using, and we could leave it there. The other thing I need to do is after I apply the changes, I have to not only uncheck the pistol and baseball bat objects on the main character itself, I need to uncheck him and hide him so he's not in our world. Although it wouldn't matter, but we don't want to have two objects that are tagged player. The instance here and the one that's being instantiated from our prefab. So that's the importance of making sure you uncheck it. But you only uncheck it after you've applied the changes back to the prefab. Alright, so going back to the code, that was the solution to that. So I was able to get the pistol and the bat in that exact same position. You'll see the way it was set up visually inside Unity. This translates that and applies the changes to the attachment points that are in the morph system. And so we do the all props thing, which gets all the loaded props. That's the other thing. I believe I've moved that up here, and the all props variable is now a class variable right here. So we have access to all the props that are in the morph system at any given time, which in this case is just two items, our pistol and our bat. And so now in our update, when the player hits key 1 or key 2, we'll attach the right hand prop which is the pistol, item index 2, or the bat. Now I added a check here because when we aim, we are doing a zoom, so we can take that camera past the player, and we're in what we call, I set up a Boolean flag called BFPS mode, basically meaning we're in a first-person camera mode. And so we don't want to be swapping props and really doing any of these quick slot items when we're aiming in the first-person mode. We want to make sure that's all we're doing. So it checks that if we're in the FPS mode, that we're only doing that, the firing of the gun or swinging of the bat, which the swinging part of the bat I haven't worked on yet. I just have primarily been focusing on the pistol itself. And so let's look at the attached right prop code then. Aside from the addition of this in front of each of these, and also we have some changes in our when you get the mouse button down, which one is the second button. Actually, I could use, there's a word fire. I could use fire 2. Fire 1 is left button. I found out fire 2 is what Unity maps to your right button. So I'll change that later. I don't want to mess with it now, but I'll go back and correct that at a later point. Yeah, so now looking at our attached right-hand prop, we're passing in the index value, 2 or 5, 2 being the pistol, 5 being the bat. The first thing it's going to check is, okay, is this empty or not? We get the item name from a player inventory to see if there's an item that's been equipped in that particular slot, and if it has, the item name's not an empty string, then we assume that it's the correct item, because based on our logic we've already set up in the player inventory script before, it only allowed a primary weapon to be in slot 2 or a secondary weapon, which is the bat and the pistol, in those slots. So that should be correct. Now later on, as we add additional items, we'll have to correct for that. Now, the other bit of code I had to modify, since we now have basically two different attachment points, right hand and R hand 2 for each item, I had to remove each of those independently, and there's a function called isPropAttached, and you pass it the name of the prop, and on that CI point object, which is the attachment point, and it'll return back a Boolean, whether it is or not. And if it is, then we want to remove that prop. And so I do that for both the right hand and R hand 2 to remove the props and reset our Boolean flag that the prop attached is equal to false. And I also added, there's another variable I forgot to mention called weapon selected. I need to track which weapon was selected. 0 means no weapon selected. 1 is the pistol. 2 is our secondary weapon, which is the bat. So I reset that variable. That's used also in this. It's used within the first-person view when we're right-clicking to zoom and fire. Okay, so looking at our code here, this modified a little bit. Basically, I had to nest in this if statement, and all I did is said if the item name was the pistol, then we're adding R hand add prop weapon selected equals 1. Else, we're adding the secondary prop. We're setting the weapon selection to 2, so we're basically assigning to R hand 2. Now keep in mind, both of these attachment points are CI points that are enabled at any given time. It's just that if there's not a prop in them, you don't see anything there. It's just like, it's really just a point in space and attached to the player at his hand. So they're always active. And they have to be active in order to add a prop. If they're disabled, you would get an error because it couldn't reference. Actually, you get an error further up in the code when we did the reference assignment to these. And yeah, so that's the basic changes I did there to make that happen. And so so let's now the other change we did. Let's look at the mouse down again and mouse up when you release. It does several things there. One, if the crosshair is not equal to null, meaning the crosshair was able to be loaded and referenced earlier, then we want to set the crosshair active, because by default that particular game object is inactive at this point before you right click for aiming. So we turn on our crosshair, and then we, using the weapon selected variable, we then activate either the primary weapon spawn or the secondary weapon spawn. We turn those on, and those are like I said, these are used only exclusively in the aiming mode, because we're in a zoomed in mode. And then we set the first person mode to true. So when you release the button here, the right mouse button is released, we do the exact opposite. We set the crosshair to false. If the weapons selected 1 or 2 are selected, we also deactivate those spawns, and we set FPS mode to false. Okay. And as part of right-clicking, there is a zooming that happens in the third-person camera here, which I think we went over before. Or it may have been third-person input, but we did set up a, and I'm trying to remember where I put that. It may be directly in the player manager code, actually. Anyways, I'm not going to look for that right now. We'll step through. Just glance real quick if I don't find it, but I've already shown that anyways. So essentially those were the changes that were made. Now, let's go back to Unity here. And we need to look at, okay, the third-person camera. When we go to aim, these are the weapon spawns that show up over here, where we're spawning that weapon in a first-person mode. We're actually setting these up, and they're enabled at runtime when you right-click the mouse button. Now, like I said, I've been working on the baseball bat. You'll see there's no additional scripts down here that are attached. You just have the basic stuff that goes with it: the box collider, mesh renderer, the mesh filter, and its transform. So it basically is just rendering that in with a collider component. Now, in the pistol, though, however, this is actually we got our pistol here, and then we added off the pistol as a child game object. I created a bullet spawn, which would be the point at the tip of that gun where I would like a bullet to come out. And I went ahead and created, and obviously since I'm showing you the script here, you know that I've succeeded in attaching these guns and getting them to fires, but I'm just going through the changes that were made. And so I created this fire bullet script, and I added an audio source and found just a gunfire shot that I wanted to use. I wanted to have something that would signify when you're firing an audible thing as well as the bullet. Now the bullet itself, let me make sure I don't need to go over anything else here. Yeah, so we got our weapon spawn, and we've got our pistol attached to that. And off the pistol, we have a bullet spawn. And let's go to under resources here. I'm going to just slide this out a little bit so you can see this. Okay, under resources, we of course had our prefabs folder, and here's our actual bullet that we have. Now initially it's disabled, so let me check that so you can see. I found this really nice, and you can see it better here now. It was a free under 3D models here, actually, props, weapons, ammunition. Yeah, they had some free a 7.62 bullet and a 45 round, which the 45 is what I'm using for this one. But you can see it looks pretty good. It's a nice copper bullet, and we're actually, oops, let's bring that back down. So we're using that as our bullet when it fires. So we actually have a bullet object. There are several ways to go around firing the bullet. I've looked at, there's ray casting, which seems to be kind of the predominant way to do it. I decided not to do that, only because with ray casting, it assumes that it's eventually going to hit a target. And it needs that target in order to get basically what's called a hit point in space, 3D space, and it returns back information. Without getting that hit point, the ray cast is essentially useless. And since we don't have, if someone's aiming out, your player's aiming out in the open air, out toward the sky, I mean, you're not going to get a hit point at that point. So I didn't really want to go with that. If we were in a closed area with walls and objects and things like that, you definitely use a raycast for that because you're going to hit an object. There's no way not to hit an object, and so you'll get results returned back on what object it hit, whether it be a player, a wall, or enemy that's within that contained area. But for an open area, it didn't seem to be the best way to do it. So what I wound up doing was just instantiating this bullet object along with this script and some code and some things that were set up. You see the bullet itself has a script called thrust bullet, which is, it has some functions that were written to that were publicly exposed, so that when you actually left click while you're right click zooming and targeting, and you left click the other button fire, on that left click it'll instantiate the bullet and set some basic properties of the bullet. You'll see I have a bullet speed. That's not one that you can set. It's just set here in the inspector. And I also have a rigid body on this bullet so that I can let physics characteristics be applied to it, such as gravity. And I set the mass. I think that was the default mass, or maybe a little bit higher. It may have been 0.25. I can't recall what or maybe the mass was. I'm sorry, the mass was 1. I think I dropped it down to 0.15 to lower the mass, because the heavier it is, the more of a drop it's going to have, like an extreme drop to the ground, because of the physics and using the gravity option that's turned on. So what I wanted to do was lighten the gravity pull on it, and these options right here, the mass drag and angular drag, directly affect how the physics engine applies the gravity and all that. So by having a lighter mass, it effectively allowed the bullet to drop less, and at that bullet speed that I currently have, seemed like a pretty good distance. I originally had it at 1,000, but the bullet speed goes so fast I couldn't quite see it, but I wanted to be able to see the bullet but have it go fast enough that you can get it going a pretty good distance before the gravity takes over and causes it to drop. So that's the numbers I played around with. I found that works well for the pistol, which is really a short-range weapon anyway. And later on I might add the ability to adjust the speed if it's required for some high-powered weapons, such as a sniper down the road, whatever. So anyways, we have a thrust bullet script, and we'll look at that. So let's go back to our bullet spawn. And I said we have a fire bullet script that's attached to it, and there's two public variables that were set up. One is the bullet spawn itself, so that a reference to that spawn is passed into this script, and then which this script is already attached to. I could have done it in code, but it was just easier just to type that out and drop in the spawn, and the script then can be utilized somewhere else. I didn't want to tie it to a specific spawn transform or whatever, but I chose to do it that way. We just drag and drop from here this bullet spawn, which should be the spawn that this is attached to, and then the weapon prefab. We drop in the weapon from our prefabs, which is the pistol that we have, because there's some information that needs out of the weapon, such as the damage we set up when it's fired. We set up on the pistol, I think a damage of 18 is what it was set to. That's in the action value property. If you remember, we have an action value property for all these items that we have in our master inventory. And anyways, that action value is used as a value that's going to be passed into the bullet, the fire bullet script, so that we can set up what the bullet's damage will be when it impacts an object out there. So so those are the two things that were passed in. Now let's take a look at that script. And so this is when a bullet is instantiated in code. this is a script that will be attached to that bullet, or is attached to the bullet. And we had our couple of publics here. Public transform. Our weapon prefab. And I chose to make the bullet prefab itself a static game object, which means that once we get this instance here, bullet prefab here in the start, we'll use that same instance each time. It won't actually have to get that every single time because it's a static. So anyways, I call the prefab bullet underscore 9mm with a capital B. It's in our prefabs, and so we use the resources.load function, which we've seen before. It'll load it from the resources folder and assign it to the bullet prefab, a static game object. That's why you don't see that, because it's static, that even though it's public. That's why you do not see it in the inspector, because of the static keyword. Then we've got a private audio source, gun audio, private variable. We're not going to do anything public with that. And then we get a reference to that audio source that was attached to the attached to this bullet object. And actually, when I say bullet object, it's actually the bullet spawn object. So at the spawn point is where the audio source is attached to, not the bullet itself. The bullet is not instantiated at this point. This is just the spawn, which is the location in 3D space where this bullet's going to be spawned from. So, yeah, so we get those references. But in the update, this is what happens. The bullet spawn is checking for, because the bullet spawn is active on the end of that gun, that pistol. When you right click and zoom and that pistol becomes active in your view there, the bullet spawn location is then active, but it will not, every frame it's checking to see if you press the left mouse button. And so I'll just put a comment there. So yeah, this is where the magic happens, where it actually instantiates the actual bullet. First thing we do is we play the audio file that's been set up in here. You see the audio clip is this pistol 01 fire 01. That's the clip that I downloaded from the Unity Asset Store. There was a free set of clips that were out there for some bullet sounds, so I used it. And so we play the clip, because that takes a lot of time to play that. We don't want to have the bullet taken off and then have the sound go off like after, like a delay. So I play the audio first, and then we instantiate the bullet by passing the normal stuff we do, the bullet prefab along with the bullet spawn position, bullet rotation. We get that directly from our bullet spawn that we've got a reference to. And then this is important, because initially, the bullet, whatever direction it's facing, it has what's called its forward direction, depending on how it was instantiated. And the bullet may or may not be facing the right direction, depending on where the player is moving. It's from where the bullet is initially spawned. The direction is going to be, its forward direction is going to be not necessarily in the same direction as where the player is continually moving. So it's important that this is done. These other lines of code are done. Now there's several things that are done here, but let me explain also. When this is instantiated from this prefab, the bullet itself, let's go back. I got to make sure I turned it off. The bullet, I had it unchecked initially. The bullet has to be disabled, because if not, what happens is everything that's in the start script of the thrust bullet begins to happen and occur. And we don't want that to happen. We don't want this start method or function in the thrust bullet script to be activated until we're ready for it to be active. So there's some things that it requires, values that need to be set that are internal to the thrust bullet script that we're gonna call or set. And so, starting with non-instance script stuff, but the first line we set is we want to get the rotation right for the bullet. And so we do that by whichever way the main camera is looking. We're going to take its rotation and just assign it to the bullet object. So the bullet is now facing the same direction as the camera view, the main camera view at that point. Now, that just gets it facing in the right direction as far as internally how it's represented with its forward direction and so forth, and the rotation on that. The object itself, the physical representation that you see, initially it comes in where it's facing upward. So we have to rotate that bullet so it's going to be facing or looking, appearing to look in the same direction as what its rotation is of its transform. And so we do that through the object.transform.rotate function. We pass in a new vector 3, and the only value we're altering is the x component of its. We want to rotate that object on the x-axis because it's facing upward, straight up. And if you were to visualize, we're just going to rotate that bullet like forward and away from us. So that's the x-axis which it would be rotating on. So we just adjust that by 90. I had to play around with -90 or 90, but 90 is the number. It's going to be one or the other. Sometimes trial and error. But anyways, we set that 90 degrees and we rotate it. So now we have the bullet at this point facing the correct direction visually, and we have its internal rotation set right for everything for the movement to occur. But it's not moving at this point. It's just sitting there still at that point. It's been instantiated. It's not even visible at this point. Well, I take that back. It is visible, but it's not enabled where the scripting is going to start running on the bullet. The other thing I mentioned earlier is we need to set the damage. So we get create a temporary variable called damage, and off the weapon prefab that's passed in up here through the inspector, we just assign a weapon that's firing this bullet. We get the inventory item attribute script or component that's attached to that weapon prefab. And remember, we have an inventory item class that holds certain piece of information about each item, so we can reference that by .item. And we had a property called action value, and so the action value on the gun was going to represent the damage, and it was set to 18 in our pistol. And so that action value gets assigned to the temporary variable called damage. And now, before we can actually set the damage, because thrust bullet is a script that's on our bullet, we actually have to, we can't access it directly. We have to get a reference to it. And the way you do that is you create a variable called of a thrust bullet type, and I call it TB, equal to object, which is our bullet object. We just get the thrust bullet component, script component. So once we have that TB, now we can start using functionality that's within the script itself. And so I created a property called set damage, which allows us to set the damage level of the bullet. And so we just pass it in one parameter, which is the damage. And also we set a gun range. Now, this is something I thought about as I was doing this. We don't really have a range for damage on our gun. Basically, the gun range is basically how far away from when it's being shot will it still allow that damage to occur. And so Right now I did something really simple, which is I took that gun range and I passed it in, and beyond that, um, there's no damage that occurs. It's just an instant cutoff. But I think I want to change that or alter it, um, where the damage is then progressively less all the way up through the maximum bullet distance that it exists in our world. Um, that number, that maximum distance, is actually set. It's variable, but it has a hard-coded offset of 100. So whatever the gun range is that we set internally in the thrust bullet script that's attached to the bullet, it sets the maximum lifespan for that bullet to be at the gun range plus 100. So that's the offset of 100. So 175 is the total distance that bullet will go. But beyond 75 meters, because that's what the measurement is in Unity, it's based off a meter system. The value of 1 in 3D space is equivalent to 1 meter. So beyond 75 meters, the gun doesn't do any damage. The bullet doesn't do any damage. And so that's how we do it, because once the bullet is released, it's its own object, flying in 3D space, totally independent of, what launched it, what gun, the player, anything like that. It just starts going in the direction we send it. And that's the method I chose to use. And with gravity, it'll eventually drop down into the ground and hit the ground. So it'll continue on, and it can hit multiple items. So if you had 2 enemies, for example, that were in line of that bullet, it would pass through one enemy and go to the next. So the bullet doesn't reduce speed or velocity, and that may be something down the road as we'll modify that. Once we get we can go back and tweak some of this and really enhance it to reduce the speed, which would cause it to more gravity to be applied. We might even reduce the damage once it hits one item, maybe one object that maybe, even if it's within the 75-meter gun range, that the impact of the damage would be reduced. If it's already hit one item, let's say at 50 meters, and it hits another at 60, there might be a difference in damage that's dealt. But right now it's the same damage across the 75 gun range. Again, I'm trying to build some kind of skeleton here of a functionality for this and get it working. We can tweak it later. And then the last thing we do is we actually set the bullet to its active state of true, which now executes and turns on basically any scripting that needs to occur on that item, which is the thrust bullet. Now let's get into thrust bullet. We have at the top of thrust bullet, the bullet itself has, first of all, a rigid body component. What the rigid body is required because of the method that we're using to apply velocity to this bullet. We're using actual physics to do that, and we'll get into that in just a minute. So we have this reference to the bullet rigid body, private. It's internal. We'll get a reference in the start here. And then we have a vector 3 that we set up, which is basically the bullet start position, which is needed so that we can get the starting position when it's instantiated in the 3D space, world coordinate space, and we can track the distance it's traveling and know, at any given point we're going to know where the bullet's at. We know where its current position is, but we can use the starting position and the current position to determine the distance it's traveled. And we have a bullet speed variable, which is actually private, and then we use a serialized field which allows it to show up in the inspector and will let us modify it. But because it's private here, it means that it cannot be modified through code directly from another script or anything. It's not like a public variable that's available, but it does allow us to set it through the inspector for ease of modifying and changing. So that's the only variable that shows up in the inspector on this is the speed. Now there's some internal variables that are used to manage the bullet while it's in motion, and even, you know, prevent it from even moving until it's set up and ready. But so we got a variable called a Boolean called is moving, which is going to be true or false, is it moving or not, whether it can damage or not. And then we have 3 floats: the bullet's damage, gun range, and max bullet range. Now these with the underscores are class level variables that are private, and these are not set directly from the functions that we saw earlier, the set damage and set gun range. If we look at those functions, set damage, it takes in the damage value that's passed in, and it actually assigns that to this private internal class variable called underscore bullet damage. And so once it has damage, then we set this can damage to true. So it has potential to damage something if it runs into it. Now we set up, we do set up a public property called damage value, which all it does is return back if, you know, can damage is set to true, then that means that it has the potential to damage, and we just return back whatever the bullet damage is. If can damage is false, then we're returning back 0, which means the damage value is 0. So this is going to be used when it strikes an object. Damage value is a public property that can be checked, and we can apply that damage value to the object it hits. Now, obviously, if it's out of range, the damage value will be 0, and so we trigger that can damage property based on the distance, and you'll see that in a minute. Now, the set gun range, again, we just passed in a float variable for the range, which is the distance, which in our case here for the pistol, we set it at 75, is the gun range. And so we set this private class variable gun range to range, and then this is how we assign the maximum bullet range, which is used to determine the lifespan of the bullet, because we don't want it to keep. Without this, initially when I fired the bullet, I used the debug.log function, and found that the bullet kept going. Even though gravity took it and dropped it through the floor, it actually continued to drop through space in a negative direction underneath our terrain. It just kept going infinitely. And obviously, if you keep firing bullets throughout a game, you're going to add another object in space that's going to keep it's going to accumulate a lot of bullets that are taking up resources and memory and obviously clock cycles, and it's going to affect the frame rate over time. If enough of them continue to, if you keep firing, you get thousands and thousands and thousands of bullets still running in the game when they don't need to be. So that's another reason for the setting the maximum bullet range, is so we can control its final life cycle. And again, we just hard-coded, gave it an extra distance of 100, so that we can just still have that bullet traveling further on and be realistic. All right, so now we have a function here called set in motion. And this is what actually sets this bullet in motion. And it's private, which means it cannot be called from outside the bullet. So the first thing it does is it gets the reference to the rigid body component, which I said we're going to use that to apply some physics to that rigid body to move the bullet. It also stores the starting position of the bullet through the transform.position property. And now this is where we actually set this bullet in motion. We create a vector 3 variable called direction, and we assign it to the transform.up component of the bullet. Transform.up, because of the rotation that we needed to, because of the rotation we did on our bullet when it was first instantiated, that's the direction that's actually facing like the forward. That's now our forward direction for the bullet, because its rotation's been altered. So the up position is in the direction of the camera view at that point. And so a rigid body has a function called add force, which works with the physics in Unity, and it takes two parameters. If we hover over it, you'll see it takes an actual force, which is the amount of force that you want to apply to this rigid body, and a mode, a force mode. Now the impulse, if we hover over it, adds an instant force impulse to the rigid body using its mass. So it just applies that force almost like a hard hit to the mass of the body and propels it, at a certain rate. So, and that rate will continue until it's stopped or hits objects that have friction, which will slow it down. And of course, gravity will bring it down, and it could eventually stop if it hits enough objects that have friction. But in our case, once it drops through the ground, it's frictionless at that point. There's nothing underneath them, and it keeps going. So it will continue to move. But anyways, that's how it's done. Very simple. You just had to get the numbers right. Now what we're passing in is the bullet speed, which again is set at 500 in the inspector. And we take the direction, because we're going to apply this force to a certain direction, which, like I said, it needed to be in the up, transform.up of this bullet. So we take the direction, we multiply it by the bullet speed of 500, and we don't want that entire speed to be applied in this frame instantly. We want it to be applied over the course of time, which in this case we can do that. We can take a slice of time. Let's say whatever the time frame is. Let's say you have 60 frames per second. We want to know what that time is for that one frame within that second, what that time frame is. And so time.delta time does that. It takes a slice of time from the entire duration. So the time in seconds it took to complete the last frame. So it's going to be a fraction of a second. And this is a way to control the same speed of any object. If you use time.delta time, it's constantly being updated by Unity and the physics engine based on, or really just Unity, based on your frame rate. So if your frame rate drops from 60 to 30, the delta time increases by 2, for example, a factor of 2. So you're always going to get a value that properly reflects the frame rate. If we were at a really super slow computer that only got 1 frame per second, well, delta time would be 1 second, because it's only 1 frame and that's for a second that's occurring. If you had 10 frames, it'd be 1/10 of a second, 30 frames, 1/30 of a second, 60 frames, 1/60th of a second. But since we're executing these frames to match that, we're going to get the same movement speed by doing this, regardless of the frame rate of the computer. And that's one technique that's used to make sure that playability is the same across systems, regardless of how much CPU power you have and frame rate. You may get a choppy game, but the movement's going to be the same. Alright, and then we set finally the is moving equal to true. So this here is the key to, well, really these 2 lines, to setting our object in motion. It's done 1 time, it's set in motion, and the add force, by doing that, directly affects an internal variable called velocity. on a game object and on the transform, and so actually in the rigid body, and as that rigid body moves, the object moves with it. And so that's it. I think that's all I need to go over on that. Now let's look at and let's see. Trying to see where. Okay, yeah, at the start. That's right. I'm just calling this. And I was thinking about having an audio source for the bullet as it travels, maybe like a swooshing sound, like whoosh, as it goes through the wind, through the air. So I kind of set up something ready to go that once I find a suitable audio sound, we'll have a bullet sound. So as it's traveling, if you're across the map and you were to shoot it, and we get to the point of having other players in here, they would hear that bullet, go past them by the bullet sound, because it would come within their audio listener component, and they would hear it as it comes and passes if it goes past them before it despawns. Yeah, so anyway, so set in motion is called at the start, and so when the bullet is actually enabled in fire bullet down here, set active to true, that's when this all occurs. Then the set in motion occurs, and then every frame we're creating this variable called distance, and we're actually calculating the distance the bullet is traveling. And so, and I'm logging that here. It's debug.log. I'm traveling several things. I'm tracking several things. I'm displaying in the console using debug.log the bullet distance that has traveled, the current damage value of the bullet, the gun range, and the maximum bullet range, because I want to be able to see. I want it to be able to see that once it got to the 75 gun range distance, does the damage reduce? And so I had to put a couple of if statements in here that are checking this distance. So once the distance is calculated, and it's done by using vector3, the vector3 class, there's a distance function, and you basically pass it in two vectors, A and B. A being, and you can put them in. It doesn't matter which one is first, but A being the source and or the starting point, and B being the destination. So I chose to put in the current position of the bullet as A. So transform.position will give us the current position of this bullet as it travels, because the transform is what's updated as it's moving. And then we stored the start position, and that's the reason we did it, is so we can pass it into this function as a second, as the source position, and it'll calculate distance. Will calculate the absolute distance. So it don't matter what direction it's traveling in. You're always going to get a positive distance between the two. It's basically the difference between those two locations. That's a positive value. And so we get this distance, and then I display all that. But down here underneath this, I put a simple if statement there that if the distance is greater than the gun range, well, then we trigger this can't damage variable to false, which means you no longer damage. So when this bullet actually collides at that point into something after the fact, it'll be like a dead bullet at that point. It won't take any damage. Okay, and also we're checking a second thing on the distance. If it's greater than, if we get to the max bullet range, then we call this function called kill, which all kill does is destroy the bullet. This .game object, you just pass it into the destroy, and it'll effectively destroy the bullet, remove it from the scene. And that's how we control the amount of bullets that are accumulating in the world. We don't want them to go beyond the max bullet range, which is, like I said, the gun range plus 100. So once it reaches that distance, it's removed from the game. So that's the code I wrote to to not only set up the proper spawning location of our attachments, but also the spawn location of a bullet coming off of our pistol when we're aiming in a first-person view. So that's kind of the code I went over. Let's actually run this so you can see all of this in motion and how this works. Let me make sure, yeah, we've got that out. Let's hit play. Yeah, so once I got this working, I mean, things were really moving along. Once I knew I had the attachment, and you know, I used the same concept with a game object for a spawn, which we've done before with spawning items. So, okay, so I've got my location where I've got the gun. So you can see now if I hit 1, see the pistol goes in his hand. Now the pistol is actually, the grip is a little bit wider than his hand, so and he doesn't actually have an animation to curl his fingers and grab the gun. So the gun is just placed in position where it needs to be. And so he can run with it. You'll see he can run with it, and he'll keep it in his hand as he's running. Now when he starts really running fast, they really got this, his arms really swing more. And so you'll see, let me pick up just some other items here. Let's get us some meds. Attachment. Okay, so I can switch to the bat now. You can see we've got a bat equipped. I can hit 2. So it switches to the bat. I've got the bat loaded in his hand. Now if I aim, there's our first person view for the bat. If I switch to the gun, there's our first person view. And I can, while I'm aiming, you can actually, you can't switch between the weapons. Once you're in that mode, you see that I'm hitting 3, 4, 5, 6. You can't hit any of those when you're aiming. You have to switch when you're in the third person view. Alright, so here's him running at the bat. You see he's swinging pretty high in front of his face, almost hitting himself with it. But now we run, you can see it's actually swinging through him in certain stances because of the way his movement is when he's running fast. They really got the arms going. And he's leaned down a little bit more. That was the best I could do with what's currently set up on this model. Later on, I'm looking at investigating how to add my own animations to this so that I can, you know, correct a lot of this. And like I said, this is the invector. I may have to just go by, like I said, by the invector locomotion plus melee plus shooter to have all that ready made for like 65 bucks. I think it'll all be done, but I'm trying to eliminate that cost, and if I can do one animation, I can do more. It's just going to be time consuming setting them all up. Alright, so anyways, going back to the gun now. That's what I've been working on, firing bullets. So we can zoom in here. That's our view for the gun. We can look up, look down, move around. We can look down if we want. And now I'm going to fire. Boom. There's our bullet that's being instantiated, property set, and it launches using add force. And if you look close, you have to really look close between the crosshair. You see the bullet kind of hit that wall there. Gravity's taken over, so it falls just a little bit under the center point. But that looks like it's at the bottom right corner of the crosshair. Just at that point. You can barely see it. That's the gravity taking over now. If we were to set it for 1,000, it would go a little further before you'd see the bullet drop. Yeah, I also want to do a little gun jerk. That I can do a little where it bumps. And what I'll do is, essentially what I'm doing to simulate that is, see the camera, as I move the camera around, the gun moves with it. So we'll just write a function attached to the camera that when the bullet's fired, we can call that function to kind of do this a little recoil. We're going to basically recoil the camera, not the gun. Although we could recoil, you could just recoil the gun, but if you're holding the gun, you've got to be able to feel it. So by doing the whole camera, we'll get that little jerk in the camera. It'll be a little kick, a little shoot kick. It'll come back down. We'll control it to kick and come back down. You'll get that. So here I am just firing a bunch of bullets. When I tested this out, I dropped down the bullet speed to something low, like 10, and so I could literally see the bullet go. And I was watching. I ran like this and I was watching it go, and just to take a look at it, make sure it's going in the right direction, see where it hits. Trying to see what happens. Actually, that was another way to see that it goes through, whether it goes through or not. I can play around with that speed. Yeah, so anyways, that's our bullet. If we look at, let's look at the log now. You'll see that last bullet. I'm logging out every frame. It's logging out there. I'm logging out the distance, bullet distance traveled, bullet damage value, gun range, and max bullet range. And you see the damage got swapped to 0 at some point. So we want to scroll up and look. And what we're looking for, here's our distance, the first one. You see as it's in 175 was our distance. Well, you can see at the speed it's going that the bullet travels several meters before Unity catches up. So it's never going to be exactly accurate unless you use fixed update, but for our purposes, just in the regular update was fine. We don't want to tax the CPU and all that too much, because fixed update, you know, you're always using fixed update. That's going to take a taxing on your frame rate, your CPU. So you want to, unless you got a CPU that can handle it, but for performance reasons, to support systems that aren't as fast, you want to use fixed update, you know, only when you're altering physics stuff and sparingly. Yeah, so if we keep scrolling up, you'll see the bullet distance is getting less and less till we get to the point where right here it picked up 73, was still less than 75, so the bullet damage was still there. And then looking here, when we did our if check, the bullet distance was greater than 75. You know, it's showing what the current, this debug statement is actually above that if statement, so that's why you're still seeing 18 there, but you'll see that it was reset at that point to 0, because on the next iteration, when it prints out the debug statement and the distance traveled was at 82, the damage was reset to 0. So we know that's working. We also know by showing this debug statement here, I know the bullet is getting destroyed and it's out of the world, because once it exceeds the 75 bullet range, you know, it's no longer, we're no longer seeing anything being logged here. So that tells me the bullet is now out of the world and it's been destroyed and de-instantiated. It's been revoked. So yeah, so that's all working good. So we know our damage levels there. Like I said, the damage value property is a public property that's on the bullet, so when it strikes and collides with an enemy, you know, we'll set up a tag on our bullet, which I don't think I have right now, or I might. Yeah, okay, I do. I do have a tag, that's right. So we'll just check that collision. Like on an enemy AI, they would have their own trigger zone for a collision. So when the bullet collides with them, you know, we can check there and get the name of this, the object that collides, and if it's the bullet, we could apply damage to, you know, the damage that its value through the damage value property. We can subtract that from the AI enemy's damage value, whatever they're currently at. And so anyways, that's what I'm going to do next. I just want to experiment with this to make sure this is all going to work. So rather than throwing a bunch of enemies right away, um, since we kind of got a fantasy type world going on here, it's not really like, you know, anything. I decided I found I found several that I do want to download that are free. I found a bunch of free resources that can be downloaded, but one resource that I did download was this tiger. We go to the asset store here and show you. Okay, go to assets, characters. Then from there, if there's sub branches, we can go to animals. And we go to price, drop this down to free and apply, and that's how you can get all your free ones. But this tiger right here, I mean, it looked kind of animated like in the sense of what we're doing right now. So, but it's a pretty decent one. It includes animations too. It has an idle, a walk, run, roar, and attack. So that's perfect. Now it doesn't have obviously a die, so we'll need to do that. We may need to create our own animation for that and add it to it, but it has some basic animations that are there. I thought I would use this one as just, you know, a tiger running out in the wild, and you know, maybe we can take some pop shots at him and make sure that that it all works. Initially, I'll set up the AI for him just to have him walking around within a zoned area. And again, a collider, a capsule collider, is great for that, for setting up zones, or even a sphere collider. But capsule, you can raise it up and straight up, so it's, you know, works great. But capsule collider you can set it up as a trigger, so objects can still go through it without stopping, like it does with a rigid body component, like walls and stuff. It'll let you go through that zone. It'll be invisible, no texture or anything, just an invisible zone, capsule collider. And so we can set up a perimeter, use a capsule collider as the perimeter for where this tiger should stay within. And yeah, so we can keep him contained, moving around for the AI portion, rather than have him roaming the entire island. We could do that. We could expand the collider all the way out to the entire island and just let him roam anywhere. But I want to keep him contained in an area so we can actually find him and know where he's at. And so we'll work on some AI. I'll probably work with the AI to execute the animations, the idle, walk, run, roar, and attack, and work on some of that. Initially, it'll just be the idle state. We'll probably just have him standing still, and so we'll just walk up to him and just start shooting him and see if we can, with 18 bullets, we'll set maybe his health to like 100, which we'll have to set up a script for that, similar to what we did with our player manager. We'll have to have an Enemymanager script that will be set up very similar to the player manager as far as what we're tracking. Initially, we'll just need, you know, well, we'll have their health, and we might want to set them up with a stamina value as well. So if they're chasing us, they have so much stamina as well that can run out, and they have to recharge it by walking. Yeah, so that's stuff to work out, but I think initially I want to just implement, if I can implement one thing, just by having a tiger, you know, spawn and work out some basic AI. I know then I can do pretty much anything with them. It's just going to take time to develop all that. So that's the first thing. I'll get a basic tiger standing still. We'll do the idle animation, where he's, you know, just standing there, and we'll go from there. And we'll give him a health at 100, and we know it should take 6 bullets to shoot him. You know, 18 damage times 5 would be 90, and so there's still 10 health left. It'll take another 6 bullet to actually take him out. So, and then we'll just have him. Since we don't have initially, we don't have a like a die animation where he drops to the ground and falls. We'll just have him despawn out of the world. We'll destroy him basically. Internally, it'll be a destroy call that will destroy his model and take him out. So we'll set up a spawner is what we'll do. We'll set up a spawner that can spawn another tiger after that one dies. And we'll get that working out where only one tiger can spawn at a time from that spawner. And so it'll be a customized spawner, similar to what we did with our other stuff, but matter of fact, it might be very similar. Well, in this case, I don't know. Well, it'll be similar, but not exactly, because the tiger is really not going to have a lifespan. His life ends when he dies. Otherwise, he'll be active in the world during the gameplay infinitely. And so we're definitely going to have a modified spawn attribute script for enemies, because I don't want the enemy to just automatically despawn and then respawn. You know, he just needs to die. When he dies, he'll be gone, but the spawner will be updated to for basically the next spawn time, or like the next time it should spawn another tiger. You know, and so we'll set that on his destruction before he dies or after. We can just we'll have a reference to the spawn transform, our game object, I mean, and we'll make a call to a function that'll be in there to set up the next spawn time, which will be some value like after that. Maybe just be a minute after he dies that another one will respawn. But then once we get one of them working, then we can place multiple spawners. We'll duplicate that and set up you know, 5 or 6 locations that spawn. So we'll get maybe like a cluster of tigers that will be, you know, spawning. As if we kill one while we're working on killing the others, we can have additional ones that will spawn within a minute. They'll be respawning from the original spawn location. So I'll kind of work on all that. That's our next move. That'll give us some target practice. And I don't know exactly what area I'll probably do this in. I think initially the first tiger, I'll just have them spawn outside of Trader's Village there, just out in where the trees are at, somewhere maybe off to the left side or right side of the building. We'll just spawn one out there for target practice. And once we get all that fine-tuned and the AI working for him, we'll put a small capsule collider perimeter off to the side there and keep him contained. Once we get all that working, then we'll have a drag and drop essentially item, or an item that a prefab. We'll create a prefab out of that we can then spawn in anywhere and set some, be able to set some default values for his spawn location, his damage, his attack, you know, the collider that we'll set up, the sphere collider. We'll be able to set maybe some parameter for the diameter of that, and so we can control based on an area, a certain area, you know, maybe the you know, he needs to be confined to a smaller area. We don't want him like climbing up a hilltop, you know, that we can't get to. Well, right now we can get to anywhere, so it don't matter. But you know what I'm saying. We'll have to have, you know, some kind of control to make it flexible, where we can control, you know, his confined area based on the size of the area that we're in, if there's a large open area or not. So yeah, things are looking up. You got any questions? Any comments? Definitely post them on this video. Again, I keep forgetting to launch the chat, so I apologize if someone is chatting out there. I've missed it. I'm sorry. But just retype any questions you have as comments to this video once it shows up on the on my list. Give YouTube at least 30 to 45 minutes or an hour maybe to process this stream once I close it, and then you should be able to post any comments. Yeah, so that's where we're at. We got some functionality. We got a gun firing, and I think it's we're making progress. It's looking good. We're getting close to the point of bringing in some AI. Once we do this AI with the Tiger, I mean the same script, enemy script, can be used for any type of 3D model. We're making it generic enough that it'll work for any 3D model character model that we bring in, whether it be an animal, a creature, or another human being. And anyway, just to show you, these are the animals I had. What I had planned on getting was probably get this butterfly just to have, and these birds just to have some, just flying around. These are not going to be, well, we might set them up where you can shoot them as well, maybe out of the air, but maybe we could have some birds that would fly and then it'll land on certain areas, and maybe they'll have an actual waypoint path that they follow. That's one way for AIs to use waypoints, where they go from one point to the next and then circle back around, and it's kind of like they're just continually moving in that pattern. That's what we'll do for our AI, and then we'll set it up, or if we get within a certain radius of that enemy, he'll be alerted and he'll instantly start tracking us, and be able to sprint with some additional velocity. So it's all in the works. But the ones I do want to get, like I said, any of these they say low poly. Let's take a close look on that. How low poly is it is the question. Yeah, those are really super low, super low. That should be no poly. I don't want those, but I'll definitely look at downloading these other ones here. There was an animated spider, which I might use. There's a gorilla. There's some humpback whales that we can put out in our water, just to have them kind of swim in there for an environmental effect out in the water. If you get near the edge, you'll see whales that are maybe swimming around the island. I haven't looked at the spider green, to be honest with you. Let's take a peek and see. Yeah, maybe something we could use. Actually looks like pretty good quality, to be honest with you. That's something we can use and animate. That could be another enemy. And I try to get ones that already have animations, like this one. If you look, took that a little while to click. Whoops. Let's go back. Alright, so let's go here, and then if we click on that and click view full details, still loading. Show more. Okay, so these are the animations. Now this one does have a death animation, so it has an idle, walk, run, attack, attack left, attack right, and a death. And they also have this thing where you can preview the animations, which is, I like when they do that. So let me slide that over here so you can see it, because it popped up in my YouTube here. Let's expand this. So that's the animation attack 1. So these are animations you can call. They're actually stored inside the model. There's the death. And let's replay that because I missed. There's the idle one where he's just sitting idle, dormant. There's the walk. There's a run. There's attack 1. Attack 2. I guess he's pulling away either left or right. You know, there's death. So yeah. Yeah, this is one I would definitely use as an enemy that you would fight somewhere. Let's go back. Yeah, so like I said, these birds, the butterfly, the tiger, they had that spider. I might use that spider as well, and as well as that one. They're all free as long as they have animations. I may use some as just props. You know, the gorilla. It's got a 4 out of 5 rating. It's probably pretty good. Um, I don't know if I'd bring in the cartoon cat. It's a little cartoony, I think, for what I want to do. They have an iguana, which I'll probably look at bringing the iguana in. Maybe use him during on the mountainside. I'll create. Probably going to alter some of the land a little bit. You know, as we customize these areas and some of these, you know, we have some of these enemies that'll just be randomly out there, basically between the towns. The different areas you go to, locations A, B, C, D, all that we had our way up through G and H, with the exception actually of actually G and H. Those are areas that are not necessarily just like a town or an area, but like Traders Village, that area. Once you get up in there, it's kind of like a safe area. You know, the other areas we had on the map, you know, that were more like a town or a location, there'll be somewhat of a safety factor there, where these enemies that might be chasing you when you're out on the paths traveling between these areas, they'll stop at a certain point. They won't enter into the city. Yeah, so a lot of these will exist as you're traveling between those areas. So we'll kind of customize an area or a terrain for a certain look to match the model here, the enemy model. Let's see, we got some sardines. I don't know. We may use those if we had a small. Again, I'm going with the free, so the selection is not that great. And that's pretty much it. This is for animals. So it looks like we got an iguana, possibly the sardines to use in the water. The angry toucans. I guess I could look at some of this, but I'll look at them on a case-by-case basis and decide if I'm going to use them. I may create like a jungle area path we have to go through and get some other kind of trees and more of a jungle-like environment and put some gorillas in there. So you may have to battle some gorillas and as you travel. So and going back to the name of the game, I've kind of been kicking around and thinking about the name and what would be the goal of this game other than just traveling around fighting enemies and doing that. There's got to be some kind of goal. But basically, the storyline is going to come along a way where, you know, the name Harvest is not necessarily in reference to a farming community where you're harvesting crops and things like that. It's going to be more along the lines and I kind of, you know, with some of the descriptions I had of the locations, it's going to be more along the lines of an alien race or alien creatures that have come to that island and have been harvesting the life off the island, whether it be the animals, the same animals you may fight, but as well as, you know, the humans, the players. We'll have some AI humans and things that will be in there that you'll interact with, but it's, you know, it's about the idea of an alien race that's come to take over the island, and so ultimately our goal would be, you know, that is the harvest. They're harvesting the humans for their own purpose in life, you know, the animals, and part of our goal would be to defeat and rid the island of these alien creatures and prevent the harvest, for example. something along that lines. And I'll probably write up some kind of storyline that can be read, and some things you'll encounter through the game that will unravel the storyline as you go, and give you an overall idea of the storyline from the beginning. Yeah, so anyways, that's going to be it. Let me be right back for just 1 minute. I got to check on something. Alright, I'm back. I apologize. I had something in the oven that I was cooking for lunch, and it is completely burnt. Burnt to a crisp. I thought I smelled something burning. There was some smoky. So I'm going to have to remake some lunch, figure something out here. But it is burnt. Yeah, so of the animals, those are the few that I would use. There's probably about 4 or 5 here. 6 maybe that I can use. Now, let's go back to characters here. I just want to show you in the free realm. I mean, there are actually some. We can go to creatures now. Go to price. Drop it down to nothing. And so there are some creatures that we can use here, like they have this orc pig, this cave troll. This one's actually nice for fantasy rhino. It's actually really good with animations, complete with animations. They have another spider, a fantasy spider, but I think the other one, it's only got 4 stars out of 5. I don't know. I haven't really looked at it. Yeah, there's alien creature, which looks like he's designed to hover, and that may be the alien we'll use to represent the ones that are harvesting. There'll be a bunch of them. When you look at the examples they have, it looks like he's hovering. So he's got some sort of a thing he sits in, and he kind of hovers, and he's got a little gun so he can shoot, a little laser gun hooked up. And that's a side view here, sort of what he looks like. But yeah, that could be our sample enemy, alien enemy. What else? A reptile character. I actually did not look at him yet. That's not bad. Actually, looking at that now, looking at the pictures, looks like the quality is actually really good. And that may be someone we can use as well. So there's a lot of good creature type things that can be used in here for free, just to put together a working example. Again, this game is going to be something I'll use in a portfolio. Character cactus. I guess you got a cactus. Hopefully, does it talk? Talking cactus. That'd be kind of funny to have in a game. Yeah, it's got an eyeball. Pretty cool. Hey, I might bring him in. He'll be planted somewhere in the middle of a desert-like area. You walk through, and he'll just start talking to you out of nowhere, and you walk past him. Maybe he'll provide him helpful hints. Maybe he'll be dangerous. I don't know. We have this kind of a crab-like creature. Yeah. So like I said, there's a lot here. And let's see what else. Yeah, actually, this Freedom's Gate here, the Deucalion's creatures. it's kind of like he has his own morphing system here, this person that did this, and you can morph between these variations, and they provide, I think, some already ready, but there's some variations that you can morph, kind of like the Morph 3D setup. And so that may be something later on I could use. There's an alien insect. There's a hammerhead whale for the ocean. And that's pretty much it on the free. Anything that was actually decent enough to use. I don't know about him. The character monster, I'm not so sure about that. But anyways, let's go back to characters. And now there are some robots. Several different robots for the free. Okay, free is set. Nothing that I see that I would actually use that matches the kind of the look and the feel. Maybe, I don't know, they're just too low poly. They need to be a little bit better than what they are. I guess maybe these pictures don't do them justice. I'll have to just do a quick view and see. Yeah, see, actually looking here, it actually looks better than what it looked like. So I don't know if I'm going to put robots in there. Just, you know, maybe it's something the aliens create to guard like entryways or something, some robots. I'm not really sure, but there are plenty of characters that are free. Now you got humanoids. I haven't really gone through that yet. Got the strong knight, which the knight is pretty cool looking, but it's almost too good for what I'm doing. There's not enough other characters here that I can use that match his quality. I might use this barbarian warrior. He looks pretty cool. Red samurais. There's a fantasy monster skeleton. Of course, I'm using the Morph 3D MCS Mail. Apparently, you can morph, do stuff in it. I haven't really played around with that yet, or I don't think I have the full thing installed for that. I just have the MCS Mail character with some things I can tweak on him. They got a female character, so eventually, if you know, I can stick with the male, I can bring in the female and give players a choice. And of course, you can morph. They have a PBR animated skeleton, which look good. Cyber soldier, that looked pretty good. Yeah, so there's several pages actually here. Are these all free? Let's see. Yeah, they're marked as free. Look, this has over 7 pages. 7 pages, I guess. So you've got, oh, this is a demo, but you know, there's some really cool models that are out there. You don't have to be a modeler to actually get anything done. I mean, there's people out there, artists and modelers, that they put the stuff up on Unity. They sell what they have, so you can utilize it in your games. But there's some that are free because they try to give you something out there to get a taste for what they do or what their capabilities are. And then, you know, maybe they assume you're going to use them for other, you know, 3D model assets, character assets. They have several here. Got like this guy here. Let's see what he looks like there without the mask on. So he could be something. He would be someone I could use for sure in what I'm doing. He's more along the lines, you know, more of a fantasy kind of look. Not really going for the totally photorealistic right now. It's because I'm not going to get a complete asset set like that for the entire game without paying for it. Ultimately, it would be great to find a modeler, somebody that can do some of this and would want to maybe be a part of this project and develop, some other props or some kind of models, and maybe has some that they have available that want to contribute that are not in the Unity Asset Store. That would be great. Let's real quick. Actually, not character. I'm gonna look at props. They have vehicles too. I mean, like I said, there's a ton of stuff here, and so they go up to $2,000, I guess, for some. Most of them are reasonable, though. I haven't seen anything over $100. I mean, at least like 75 was the highest. There may be something up in the 2,000 range that I hadn't seen yet. But yeah, so you got like props, which could be like guns. You got structures like rocks and things like that. You got trees. You got internal furniture. Various things, rocks, free pack. Just all kinds of props, from carpets to things that sit on the table to chests. Some are really good too, and crystalline structures. This barrel kit, I already downloaded that and have it, so I could use that in different areas. I also downloaded, there was some collection of mushrooms and rocks. There we go. Furniture, Japanese school desk. Nice. Could be used in my other educational product I was going to work on, project later on. Got some school lockers. Nice. But yeah, there's a ton of stuff to go through, and this is all free, what you're seeing here. And you can go by category here. For example, I'm curious about well, food. We don't have any food items really. We have yeah, nice. Got some canned items we can pick up. Root vegetable set. Crescent's back. Now, that's a little photorealistic for me for this, what we're doing. But you got a cutlery, silverware that can be used. Let's see what these are, the fruit pack. Well, I was trying to play it. It won't play. Anyway. Yeah, there's a ton of stuff, though. Pages and pages for this, too. Yeah, so we'll cut it off here. I know I've been kind of going through the Unity Store, Asset Store. I'm just trying to show you what's out there. I mean, I could focus on the scripting and building the game and really get enough props and things that I need to make things happen without actually going into a modeling program like Maya or Blender, or using other programs out there for animation to create the animations in the models. I mean, I could just eventually, I do want to do that. I want to transition into I'll probably more likely use Maya, because I think they do have a free version of Maya that can be used now for students, and if not, I'll use Blender, which is great too. There's a lot of things that are done that are really good in Blender, and it's free, open source, kind of like some of the other programs out there. So yeah, there's plenty of tools out there that are free. You literally can, for someone to say, you can't create games, I don't have this, I don't have that, I don't have training. The reality is you really can. You can learn everything you need to learn about creating games for the most part for free. And maybe if you want to build some really cool AAA type games, you know, you might need to invest in some assets that are worthy enough to put in the game. But the way I'm viewing this is that we'll get everything in the way it is, and later on, you know, we could switch out to some higher quality props, images, creatures, the highest quality, and same with the environment, and that would really change the look and feel of this game overall. You know, just adding sound effects is going to be a huge deal. You can tell just with the gun firing, just having even that single shot. But I think the sound pack, I need to look at it. I think the sound pack I downloaded for guns also had like a reload, like when, and it had a clip for like when you slam a clip into a gun, like a pistol, and then when you reload the gun, a reloading clip sound. They had the various bullet sounds. I chose that one, the one I'm using, and they may have even had, like when the bullets fired, they may have even had that kind of swishing sound that I wanted going through the air. So if I have all that, I'm going to look through it. I'm going to incorporate all that into our gun, gun scripting that we have right now, and bullet firing scripts, and add all those sounds into, and also I can use them when you. I'm going to change. Here's the change I'm going to make. I'm going to change the ammo box that we have to be just a 30 round box of ammo to match basically our clip that we have, because we only have a single clip. Our clip will be, it's currently set to 30. We'll leave it at that. And so a pistol with 30 clips, 30 rounds, that's pretty good though. So we'll change it to that, and we'll make the ammo boxes match that. The reason being is I didn't want to get into, if you have as soon as you have stacked ammo boxes, and then we use a portion of those bullets out of an ammo box, we can no longer stack that one. We're going to have to pull it out separate and work in some logic to add it as another item in our inventory. But if your inventory is full and you have shot, let's say, 10 bullets out of 30 out of the clip, and then you hit the reload to reload out of a box of ammo, you're taking a box of 100, taking 10 bullets out of it to fill up your clip. And then if you have for example, if you have a full inventory, it's going to have to throw that item, the remaining 90, out as an item out in the world that you can't pick up. So what I'm going to do is just change it to 30 and keep it simple, where, because I could work out all the logic for that. I'm not saying I can't do it, but again, I'm just trying to, there's so much to do to get a working playable game here that I'm trying to do the bare minimum at first, kind of build the framework and get things going, and then we can go back and do some enhancements later. So what I'm going to do is just have the ammo box bullet count in there at 30 to match the clip size, and then when you reload your weapon, it's just going to use the entire ammo box. Whatever you need out of the ammo box to fill up your clip, that's what it'll do, and the rest you'll be throwing away. And there's enough ammo boxes that spawn that you can stack up probably 30, 40, or 50 of those easily, and always come back and get more because they're spawning all over the place in Trader Village. So that'll be kind of like an area where you can gather supplies, is in Trader's Village. Yeah, so that's kind of where we're at with that. I'll just work on adding those sound effects and then adding in the tiger, which I told you about. I have the tiger already here. If we look, well, under 3D models here is the props for the ammunition, but there was a folder called tiger. There it is, tiger. Yeah, so there's our tiger, and they have a sample scene to demonstrate all this stuff, but you got a hit, a run, sound, tiger idle, tiger walk. So let's see. It's got a tiger rig, nice. They include the rig, that's cool. Idle. Okay, there's the actual animation that's in there. We can hit play to see how that works. So that's his idle state right there. That's what it's going to look like in the game. And it repeats. It's a continual loop, so he's continually, when you run that, you'll run it in a loop. It runs automatically. That's just a property you set to loop. Once you hit play or start that animation, it's just animating that model in place, and it loops. So we'll just have him sitting out there initially like that in the idle state while we take pop shots at him. Of course, I have to do some setup on him. So without me rambling on too much, let's end the stream. We've gone long enough on this. So we'll end it right here. Appreciate everyone stopping out. Again, questions, comments, post it to the video once it shows up when YouTube finishes processing. And the next video will hopefully have an AI, or at least, like I said, we'll be able to take shots at our tiger hair and cause damage and all that. So that'll be the first step in the right direction of building in some enemy AI. So thanks again. See y'all. Have a good day.